Hey there, House here. Well, this NBA trade deadline gave us some unexpected excitement to say the least. I'm here just to give you a review of some of the key moves that were made and how they'll impact the teams involved. So first, I want to talk about the Chicago Bulls and all the trades that they made during this deadline. Yes, the Bulls made trades during the deadline, and yes, they were multiple. Something that hasn't been said very often when the former GMs ran the show for the Bulls. For starters, they made the first big splash on deadline day by trading for all-star big man Nikola Vucevic. With him, they also got Al-Farouq Aminu for Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and 2 first-round draft picks. Now, at first glance, it appeared that they were giving up a lot for these 2 players, but once the initial shock settled in that the Bulls were actually being active buyers at the deadline, it was a great trade. The Bulls moved on from the $28 million due to Porter Jr. this year, as well as the struggling big men that they drafted in the first round 2 years ago. The first round draft picks could come back to bite them, but looking at how this team is setting up, those picks would be later picks in the first round anyway. They clearly weren't done there, as they were part of a 3-team trade with the Washington Wizards and the Boston Celtics that sent second and third-year players Daniel Gafford and Chandler Hutchinson to the Wizards, along with Luke Kornet to the Celtics for Daniel Theis, Troy Brown Jr., and Javonte Green. The last 2 probably won't factor in much, but acquiring Daniel Theis is pretty big. Their starting lineup consists of Tomas Satoransky, which will eventually be Kobe White's spot again soon, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Lauri Markkanen, and Nikola Vucevic, with Kobe White, Denzel Valentine, Garrett Temple, Thaddeus Young, and Daniel Theis coming off the bench, with Al-Farouq Aminu and Troy Brown Jr. for some defensive prowess. Needless to say, the Bulls are much more exciting now than they were just a few days ago. Now for the team that traded away Nikola Vucevic, who were the Orlando Magic. They went into full rebuild mode when they also traded away Evan Fournier and Aaron Gordon. With their haul of 2 first-round draft picks as well as a couple of players from the Bulls trade, they also received Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, a first-round draft pick, and 2 second-round draft picks. The draft capital is always nice, giving you the ability to build your team how you see fit, as well as Gary Harris, who is an accomplished scorer who is shooting over 36% from 3 this year, and RJ Hampton, who is a first-round draft pick in this year's draft. Hampton has not received very much playing time, but this could be his opportunity to really show his new team and this league what he can do. The next team I wanted to touch on are the Miami Heat, as they were a bit active during the deadline. They started small by trading for some defensive help in Nemanja Bjelica. Hey, who doesn't love some defensive ability added to their roster? But they weren't done there. At the near end of the deadline, they acquired Victor Oladipo from the Houston Rockets. They gave up Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, and an option to swap first-round picks in 2022. Not a terrible amount for an instant scorer in Oladipo. This is a solid trade for the Heat just before the deadline that makes them primed for another postseason run. Not to mention that there's a rumor that they're targeting LaMarcus Aldridge, who just reached a buyout of his contract with the San Antonio Spurs. I don't know about anyone else, but I'd take a 35-year-old Aldridge coming off the bench any day. He can still shoot. All right, another trade that took place was George Hill going to the 76ers for Tony Bradley, Terrence Ferguson, and 2 second-round draft picks. Now, I'm not mentioning this because of George Hill moving to the 76ers, but because of what Oklahoma City Thunder received in exchange. They've been on a draft pick run since they traded Kevin Durant. Currently, they have 34 draft picks, 17 first-rounders, and 17 second-rounders in the next 7 years. That's a lot of capital to play with. One can only imagine what different combinations they can attempt to make to give them the opportunity to draft top 3 in the next handful of drafts, just because of everything that they could offer different teams with all of this capital. The Thunder are priming themselves to be one of the few teams that can draft near the best player in the draft for the next 4 years to come. Watch out for this team. Well, that's about all I wanted to cover on this episode. If you feel I did not cover a certain trade and you would like me to discuss it in further detail, please feel free to leave a comment on my video. Thank you for tuning into the House Report. I am very excited, as I'm sure many of you are, for this back half of the NBA season as well as the postseason. And for all my betting friends out there, remember, you'll win some and you'll lose some, but the house always wins.